In the next few minutes, we will demonstrate with this 18-inch pipe how to make a successful butt wrap joining two fiberglass pipes together. These are the tools you will need: a handheld circular saw, a framing square, measuring tape, marking pen, level, heat gun, and a 5-inch electric grinder with a 36 to 60 grit grinding disc and a rubber backing pad. This is the butt wrap kit. First, confirm the contents with the label. This kit contains a complete vinyl ester butt wrap kit. You see that this kit is for an 18-inch pipe, which is what we will demonstrate in this video. Contents include the appropriate adhesive package for the resin system that you're working with. This is used to coat the cut ends of the pipe and bridge the pipe together. Catalyst, resin, finish coat resin. All of your consumables are included, including rollers, mixing buckets, rubber gloves, stir sticks, measuring vial for your catalyst resin ratio, and the cut-to-length butt wraps with glass pre-cut to length. Now that the pipe has been cut, we will demonstrate the butt wrap process by showing how to join two pieces of filament wound pipe together for 1-inch through 84-inch sizes. The principles shown here will also work for attaching fittings onto the end of pipe. You can get your takeoff dimensions for your fittings or cut lengths, plus other instructions in this F6080 manual. To get one, contact your local distributor or Smith Fibercast. We will clean back about 2 inches from the ends of the pipe by knocking off the glaze, taking it down to the dull finish. Then we'll coat the cut ends of the pipe with some of the adhesive supplied in the kit. We'll join the pipe together, then bridge them with the adhesive, and then cure that out so it will hold the pipe together while you're applying the butt wrap. The next step is to mix the enclosed adhesive using the elements supplied with the kit, including rubber gloves, catalyst, spatula, mixing stick, and Part A. Refer to the enclosed instruction sheet for specific directions for mixing the catalyst. This material is good from 60 to 100 degrees, which will cure in 24 hours, or you can accelerate the cure with a heat gun in less than 1 hour. Make sure you're wearing impermeable gloves and chemical splash goggles. Then add the catalyst to the adhesive. The catalyst is red. The way you know when the adhesive is mixed thoroughly is when the color is consistent throughout. Be sure to scrape the sides and bottom of the can while mixing. We have a consistent color. Now we're ready to coat the cut ends of the pipe. It is very important that you always coat the cut ends of the pipe. You can do it either with catalyzed adhesive or catalyzed resin with a paintbrush. This is necessary because there are certain chemicals that can attack the glass. Now that the ends are coated, we butt the pipes together and square them up. Now we're ready to bridge across. What the adhesive does is fill any gaps that you may have between the pipe ends. Apply about 1/8 to 1/4 of an inch over the seam all the way around the pipe. The adhesive is temperature sensitive, so the cooler it is, the longer it takes to cure, and the hotter it is, the shorter time it takes. So using a heat gun, we will accelerate the curing process. It should only take about 15 to 20 minutes to cure with a heat gun to make it ready to grind. Now that the adhesive is cured, you need to let it cool down before you start grinding. While the resin is cooling, you can lay out the glass supplied with the kit and mark the pipe where you will sand or grind it. Always remember that you will have to sand or grind the pipe a 1/2 inch past the widest piece of glass you have. In this particular kit, this is our widest piece, which is our cover mat, so we measure it and add a 1/2 inch on each side, putting the halfway point approximately in the center of the seam. The width will vary according to the pipe size and pressure rating. That's why it's important that you unwrap your glass and measure the widest piece of glass, which is your cover mat, which will fluctuate. Now that the adhesive is cooled down and we have the area marked for the widest piece of glass, we will use the grinder to shape the adhesive by taking the highest point out and feathering the edges down. Now that we have the adhesive ground down and feathered on the edges, and we now have our widths, we're ready to apply the glass and resin. The sequence you follow in applying the glass is determined by pressure rating. We will show the glass sequence for an 18-inch butt wrap, 75 psi 6:1. This will consist of 2 layers of chopped strand mat, 1 layer of veil, the veil being the corrosion barrier, and this is your liner. The veil will go against the pipe when we wet this out. After we get the liner on, we'll apply our structural glass layer, starting with the narrowest to the widest piece of glass in this layer. In this particular wrap, we have 2 4-inch and 2 6-inch. Those are your structural layers. This is the cover mat. In this kit, it is 8 inches wide. We will put that on at the very last. Always remember that your chopped strand goes to the pipe. Your woven here is always facing up. You never want to go over 5 layers at a time. So we're basically including the liner and cover mat as 1 layer, the 2 4-inch as the next layer, and then the 2 6-inch as layers 3 and 4. That means this particular butt wrap will have a total of 5 layers. Whenever you mix your resin, remember that resin is based on quart quantities. Check your instruction sheets that match the particular type of butt wrap you have so you know what type of catalyzation ratio you need. We measure a quart of resin and put it into the mixing bucket. Again, check your instructions for the mixing instructions. For this particular resin grade, the catalyzation ratio is 13 to 22 milliliters of catalyst per quart of resin. It's also very temperature sensitive, so we'll measure about 16 milliliters, about halfway between 13 and 22. Pour it into your resin. Use your stir stick to stir the resin and catalyst very vigorously. You'll notice the resin started out as a purplish color. Now it is turning into a green tint. When you see a lot of small air bubbles starting to form, you'll know you have the catalyzation all the way through the resin. Always wet your rollout surface with mixed resin before you lay out and wet your glass layers. And wet out your part before applying any glass and resin. Lay down your first chopped strand. This is your liner. We're going to do what we call an outside tie-in. Put the chopped strand down and the veil up. The last piece of your liner is the veil material. Put it on top. When you wet this material with the veil out, roll in one direction, not back and forth. Be careful not to add too much resin to your glass. Now we have our glass wet out, and we'll apply it to the part with the veil side down against the pipe, laying it right over the center of the seam. Roll it out. Wet the next layer, which is the fab mat layer. We'll wet out the woven side first, then we turn it over and wet out the chopped strand side. Now we'll apply the fab mat layer right over the center. Remember, every time you add a new layer, be sure to overlap or stagger the end of the new layer about 3 inches from the end of the previous layer. This prevents a lump from forming where the ends would stack up. Roll it out with enough pressure to roll all the air bubbles out. Next, we roll out resin to the third layer, known as the last layer of structural glass. Roll out the woven side first, then turn it over and wet the chopped strand side. Then we put 2 of these layers on the pipe, remembering to center them and to stagger the joints by about 3 inches. Even though we're not showing application of the 4th layer, you will wet and apply it the same way as this one. Wet the last glass layer, which is the cover mat. Don't get this layer too wet, or it will fall apart on you when you try to apply it to the pipe. This last layer is the widest layer, so it covers up the woven. Smooth out the resin, removing the air bubbles under it. Once all the air is out of the layup, stop rolling it. You will not use heat to accelerate the cure of the resin. It must cure on its own time to prevent gases from creating air pockets as it cures from the pipe outward. This is how a finished butt wrap should look. We will now let it cure out and get hot, then examine the butt wrap for any kind of delamination. If there is none, we'll apply the cover resin. When the butt wrap is completed, don't go off and leave it. As it starts generating heat, the resin tends to get thin and run down to the bottom of the pipe from both sides, and if too much resin accumulates on the bottom of this layup, it will sag, creating a bulge at the bottom. So you need to stay with it, rolling the resins back up to the top if necessary, until it gets to the B stage. You'll test when it's at that stage by seeing when it has a rubbery feeling to the touch and doesn't leave any resin on your finger. At that point, you can walk off and leave it. The cover resin, which is a pigmented resin, will be the final layer you'll apply once the butt wrap has reached the B stage. You will use the same catalyst you used with the other resin earlier. Check your instruction sheets for the proper catalyzation ratio. Be sure to stir it very well until you see little bubbles as before. This indicates the resin is completely catalyzed. Now that the butt wrap is in the B stage, apply the cover resin. The cover resin is a resin identification system which contains a paraffin wax to provide an air-inhibiting cure. It also provides UV protection for the butt wrap. Put on a nice even coat. There you have a completed 18-inch 75 psi butt wrap. Remember that on larger sizes you may have more layers of glass. If so, stage your layers. Apply and let cure only 5 layers at a time, letting it cool down before applying the remaining layers.